Retiring Bowman MP Andrew Lamin has refused to repay $10,000 in travel expenses claimed in 2019 after a parliamentary expenses watchdog said his claims were not for parliamentary business. Don't miss out on the headlines from Redlands Coast. Followed categories will be added to my news. Retiring Bowman MP Andrew Lamin has refused to repay $10,000 in travel expenses claimed in 2019 after a parliamentary expenses watchdog fined him, reporting his claims were not for parliamentary business. The Independent Parliamentary Expenses Authority examined 30 expense items incurred by Mr. Lamin and his family during the period from June 21, 2019 to June 27, 2019. Of these expense items, 21 were found to be inconsistent with the relevant legislative provisions. The report said the total value of recoverable expenses was $10,360.05 including GST and associated fees. It also included a 25% penalty loading of $2,072.01. The IPEA found the dominant purpose of trips to Tasmania at a combined cost of $3,867.31 was not parliamentary business. Prime Minister Scott Morrison, Bowman MP Andrew Lamin and Redlands City Council Mayor Karen Williams, who also had a tilt at running for the seat of Bowman as an LNP candidate after Mr. Lamin decided not to recontest. Mr. Lamin, who is not contesting his long-held Bayside seat, was given the opportunity to review the draft report prior to publication. He has maintained that the travel was related to parliamentary business, and he made a 30-minute speech at an eye surgery conference in Hobart on invitation and attended a horticultural dinner. Plenty of quasi-judicial bodies presumed I was guilty last year, Mr. Lamin said. Now it's clear that I'm innocent. One has just dropped their investigation. Parliamentarians get 3 return trips a year for a family member to travel, and on this occasion my family accompanied me. A second suggests addressing a Hobart eye surgeons conference and attending the latter half of the Hort Connections Gala dinner isn't parliamentary enough, and want the trip repaid 3 years later. I reject this report and won't be paying their invoices. The audit from the Expenses Authority said Mr. Lamin misled its investigators by claiming he was a registered speaker at an event in Tasmania that he attended for an hour. It also found all associated expenses including Mr. Lamin's return travel, taxi expenses, and travel allowance were not incurred in accordance with the Parliamentary Business Resources Act, with the one exception being a taxi expense for travel between Melbourne Airport and Parkville on the 26th of June 2019. Federal Liberal MP Andrew Lamin and his wife Olesja at their home in Redland. Photo, Dan Peled. The audit found the dominant purpose of Mr. Lamin's travel from Brisbane to Hobart on June 21, 2019, was not parliamentary business. It also found all associated expenses, including fares for the travel of Mr. Lamin and his family, hire car and taxi expenses, and travel allowance incurred in Tasmania over the period were not incurred in accordance with the Act. The watchdog accused Mr. Lamin of giving vague references when the allegations were put to him. Mr. Lamin's responses have been deficient in content and detail, the report found. He then claimed expenses for his wife for a trip to a conference in Melbourne, which he only attended for an hour. IPEA understands his spouse attended in her own right, and for the entirety of the Hort Connections conference, the report found. By his own evidence, Mr. Lamin was only in attendance for the final hour of the dinner that concluded the conference. Mr. Lamin decided not to recontest his Bayside seat of Bowman after 2 women made complaints about his behaviour on a television show. Prime Minister Scott Morrison ordered him to undergo empathy training, which he did, and subsequently media critics were forced to apologise to Mr. Lamin.